Good evening. My name is Dr. Deborah Weston. I've been teaching for 20 years in the Peel region. I currently teach the Empower in a special education class for students with reading challenges. I earned teaching specialists in reading, special education, math, and whole degrees in science, business, and education. 5 years ago tomorrow, I was conferred with a Doctor of Philosophy in Education Policy and Leadership at Brock University. Why am I listing all my qualifications? There's a reason. I am here to talk to you about supporting students who have challenges with reading because I have the lived experience of dealing with a learning disability, dyslexia, my entire life. It exists. I deal with it every day. It's real, and I am proof it happens, and it's not going away. Reading, and this is my student Kay. She's in my class. I didn't think she was coming. I didn't plan this, but her mom came, and her sister's also in the Empower class at our school, so I thought it would be lovely for her to come up here, because she decided today that my class decided they would write part of my speech, so she's not going to read it, because I'll read it. So, reading disabilities like dyslexia are a result of different brain structures. It typically presents as difficulties in spelling, phonemic awareness, like sounds of letters and words, verbal memory, verbal processing speed. Dyslexia tends to occur in families, and there is no link between learning disabilities and lower intelligence, which I had to deal with a lot of my life. It is important to note that reading disabilities do not disappear with age or education. People with dyslexia become good readers through hard work and developing strategies that work for them to support their literacy. I do this with my students using the Empower program every school day. Students who cannot read struggle with many aspects of school and are more vulnerable to psychosocial stress, behavioral issues, bullying, much lower educational achievement. And the result of these challenges means that these students can face lifelong consequences of things like homelessness, mental health issues, and an involvement with the criminal justice system. Because if you can't read, you can't get a good job. All students with reading disabilities have a right to learn. The Education Policy Memorandum number 119 cites that all publicly funded school boards are required to address the barriers to learning through policies of equity and inclusion. To not deal with these barriers is a human rights violation against the Ontario Human Rights Code. Supportive actions to deal with these barriers to learning include early identification of students with reading challenges, using instruction through scientific, evidence-based, and systematic instruction in reading, such as the Empower program. Increase special education and programs tailored to meet the students' needs. You'll notice that I'm having trouble reading because I'm learning reading disabled, just in case you were wondering. I can read much faster in my head. The in-depth psychoeducational assessments inform students' IEPs, so we can put things in there that work specifically for that student, because writing generic IEPs do nothing for anyone. As a note, there are currently only 2 ways for students who show signs of a learning disability to get these assessments, and people have already talked about this. 1, being on a really long waiting list to get a publicly funded board assessment, or 2, having parents pay up to or over $4,000 to get an assessment done privately. This is not equitable or inclusive, as many parents cannot afford this cost. This is not fair. This is huge. This is putting students who live in lower socioeconomic situations at a huge deficit in their whole life. Going through life without the ability to read is tough. People with learning disabilities lose their sense of capability, dignity, and self-worth, and may develop depression and anxiety. This comes with underemployment and the possibility of a life of poverty. Finally, I know what it's like not to read and write well, as I struggled in all levels of my academic studies. I failed grade 1 because I was a slow learner, and they almost failed me in grade 4. I'm older than I look. But by the time, in my time as an elementary, secondary, and university student, I was told that I made careless mistakes and needed to work harder. I was already working really, really hard. I had grades taken off my essays, assignments, and exams due to my poor spelling and grammar. Many professors thought that my poor spelling and grammar were a direct reflection on my ability and intelligence. I was told by a high school teacher that I would never go to university. My biggest challenge in being learning disabled was my lack of confidence in myself as a person and in my ability to read and write. I am still a poor speller. I still can't really read out loud very well past grade 5. You know that. My self-worth remained low for a significant part of my life, and I lived with anxiety. Even though I present as highly self-confident, I still struggle with my confidence today. Now, this is a part of my speech, the speech that my students wrote, and I'll just go on. With the recent cuts to education, my students are very worried that our special education reading program, Empower, because it's expensive, will be cut. Today, they wrote this, and they said, "You have to put this in your speech, Ms. Weston." So, and Kay was one of the authors, so I'm thrilled that she's here. Quote, "If this Empower program gets shut down, kids with learning disabilities will struggle day after day. The kids will not be able to get a proper job, a proper education or good jobs. This reading program has helped so many kids become readers. I'm sure, make sure we get enough money to help kids like us. Don't shut down education, special education programs like ours. Empower really works." I ask you, whether you are a parent, an educator, a community member, a member of parliament, a leader in a board of education, or a student, to push for more support and intervention for Ontario students who deserve the right to read, as the right to read, Ontario students who deserve the right to read, as the right to an education is a human right. Thank you very much. I just also wanted to say one thing. I spent the day testing because I have to do testing 3 times a year with my students, and I just tested Kay today. When she came into my class, she was reading at a grade 3 level, or 2 or 3 level last year. Today, now we have a different, we talk about reading differently in our class. Outside, speaking, and in your head. Speaking, she can reading verbatim from a piece of paper, she can probably read at a 5, 6 level. In her head, she can read at a grade 12.8 level.
Kay, can I ask you a question? So you were in a regular classroom before you were in Miss Weston's class. So what was the difference when you were in the regular classroom versus Ms. Weston's class?
Or you can call me Dr. Weston.
Dr. Weston.
It's really different. There are less kids, and it's easier to focus in my class, and you get more help. It really helps, and it works.
very much.
Dr. Miriam Hansen.
Good evening. My name is Miriam Hansen. I practice as a consultant pediatrician in Barrie, and over 75% of my office practice involves children with developmental, behavioral, mental health, or school challenges. So the issue of learning disabilities, or LDs, is of paramount importance to my clinical work, as many children who struggle with school are referred to a pediatrician for assessment. Now, if a child is identified as having a likely LD, physicians don't typically diagnose LDs. Most pediatricians will refer the child back to the school for intervention, as it's not considered to be a primary medical issue. Rather, identification and management of LDs are considered to be the responsibility of the education system. However, it has been my experience that the educational system lags in identifying LDs and also in providing appropriate support and interventions. Many children are referred back to a pediatrician several years after the initial evaluation because they continue to struggle in school, and frequently little has been done to formally address LDs via their school. As a result, I see increasing behavior and mental health issues in children as they get older when LD is the root cause. The child or adolescent may present with anxiety, anger, low mood and depression, suicide attempts, or behavioral outbursts that may require police involvement. As LDs affect 10% or more of children, this results in a very large cohort of children that are at high risk for negative mental health consequences. These, in turn, result in further academic failure, social challenges, stress on families, and sometimes I have to prescribe medication for the mental health issues. So what starts as a non-medical issue becomes a medical issue. In pediatrics, interventions almost always have better outcomes the earlier they are implemented. Yet LDs appear to only be addressed once a child has repeatedly failed at school or developed other negative consequences. I have now had personal experience with the educational system as a parent of a child with dyslexia. The lack of understanding about LDs by many frontline educators has been very eye-opening.